Here we are again. Just another day in beautiful, sunny Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And the weather is not that bad. It's cold, but the sun feels actually really good. Just put on a bunch of black and it starts to like absorb it all. And you get the best of both worlds. Feel hot inside and cold on the outside. So, as you know, the world continues to spiral downward into oblivion, into the realm of what I would call beyond idiocracy, into the complete moron status. And that's okay, because the world is going to do what it's going to do. And you know, you're here in the world, but you're not of it. There's your escape clause right there. There's your remedy. Everything in law has to have remedy. You have to have remedy, right? So everything that's brought against you has to have a remedy, right? So the world comes against you with the persecution because it's error, it's ignorance, it's a liar from the beginning. That's the world of material, fashion, form. Okay, it's to look to the outer realm of deficiency, the material, fashion, form. Okay, I talk about this like every time, but we have to keep focused. We got to remember this stuff. You have to stay plugged into it. It's a consciousness. What I talk about is truth. And hi there.
Hi. Beautiful day.
Yeah, I love it. You got to stay rooted in one simple idea. God is all. You know, and it gets tough sometimes. You know, I get to the point sometimes where, you know, my emotions get really on overdrive, and you know, you want to be mad, you want to cry, you want to do things that, you know, the carnal gets attached and attracted to, you know, the stories that play out in the outer. And it's okay, you go with it. You know, if you've got to express yourself, you do it. That's why I go to the gym, you know, usually twice a day. But ironically, last night I went to the gym and I just didn't want to do it. It's one of those, a rare phenomenon. I just had no desire. I went in and something about it just was like not appealing. So I just walked out and left. And I haven't done that since, you know, since I was sick years and years ago. Because I have never taken it for granted since then, because it's such an opportunity to be able to do it. But being, you know, an empath and talking to people and, you know, going through some things, and people are going through some things, going through some challenges, and all of a sudden my emotional body, you know, if you want to call it that, it's, you know, it's like right here, this magnetic ether, okay? We pick it up from others a lot of the time. Hi there. And so we carry these, you know, these thought suggestions, thought forms, and then they bump up against resistance, and that creates emotional friction, which is heat. And then once we identify with it, once we collapse ourselves into the storyline of the mortal dream, and we start to walk through the five senses and identify with the world of the outer, then we get troubled. And so I'm doing my rooting today. This is what I'm doing. This is how I do it. I guess the title of this video is just get out in nature and just get rooted into that which is, and let that which is not, just let it go. Just let it do whatever it's going to do. Devour it within thyself. Know that only the good is true, only the good is real, and you can bring it all into your now and then qualify it with perfection. Anything that's disharmonious, I am the law of forgiveness and all-consuming flame for all inharmonious human activity and consciousness. I'm dissolving matter within myself. I am this perfect day, and the life that lives in me is a light that cannot fail. I refuse to fear, because all power is within me. Christ in me has already overcome the world. And so what we have to do is we have to disengage. You have to break the loop. You have to break the cycle in the mind. The mind is going to go negative if you let the outer steer you, because the outer is extremely negative right now. It's almost insane. If it's not clinically insane by now, the average consciousness of most people, it will be soon. Because if you look back 10 years or so, look at this guy. He's going to peel out of the parking lot maybe. I don't even know what he's doing. But if you look back 10 years ago, people were a little more normal, you'd say, right? If they would see ahead, they would see what they'd be doing today, wearing bubbles around when they eat and masks and putting poisons in their body, expecting to get well. Maybe 20 years ago. It sort of crept up for the last 20 years or so. Eating nothing that remotely even looks like food. All chemical processed stuff. It's just complete upside down insanity. Everywhere you look. Relationships are falling apart, families are falling apart, businesses are being destroyed. And yet perfection has never been moved, it's never budged, and it's never been taken off its pedestal. And so we have to find our way to bridge the gap and return back to that perfection and stop identifying with all of the friction, the turbulence, the emotional discord. And it's like training day every day, because it's going to come against you. It's going to persecute you, because it does for me, it does for everybody. The world is not a nice place. If someone told you that the world was a nice place, you're in for a rude awakening. Jesus came to the world bearing love, and they hung him on a tree. That should tell you enough right there. I come bringing gifts. I've got love for everybody. Put him on a tree, hang him. And those are the same people that are walking around pretending to be your friends, colleagues, neighbors, and associates right now. And all they need is a little bit of programming to push their fear barometer slightly over the teeter-totter tips this way. And that fear barometer, see, it's always fear. Fear is the first step to sin. So as soon as they step into fear, what happens is, boom, condense right down into materialized form, into matter. And matter is under the law of sin and death. It's under the punishment and the curse. And so anything that identifies with matter comes under the law of the sin and death and the punishment and the curse. And right now it's Judgment Day. So the whole game here, the whole training day, is to stay out of it. Get out of matter. Get out of matter and get back into spirit and stay there. Because your only protection is through, the I am presence within, the spirit, turning it all over to source, whatever you want to call that. The true you, that's never been mortal, that's never been temporal, never had a birth date, never had a death date, you never left heaven. You have to argue for your claim. You have to defend yourself, okay? When you're being persecuted, you have to have a defense. Your defense is the Word of God. It is the name that you were given, okay? Name is identification, all right? You're identified in spirit once you join with your thought, with God's thought. So everything is within the mind. It's within thought. So our whole goal is to identify our mind with the mind that was in Christ Jesus, the mind of God. I'm of the pure mind of God. The best way to do that is to get away from all the crazies around you. You might have to detach and go sit in a room by yourself. You might have to go meditate for an extra hour a day. You're going to have to up your game. What you used to do might not be enough anymore. For some people. For some people, you're doing just fine. You're heaven on earth now and you never left. But I'm there too most of the time. But sometimes I get I get rocked off my ledge too. Because something comes against you and it just happens to catch you. You know, somebody close to you might be suffering. And you might be picking up on it. And you might be taking it on. Whatever it is. The solution is not to push against it, ever. The solution is never to acknowledge and validate any reality behind it. It's to just identify with spirit and let the power within God's law of adjustment, God's spiritual power, correct all the deficiency. And so the way that I found works for me is just heading out here where I can tap into some stillness, quiet space. Sorry about that, my camera just went haywire. And disengage the reasoning mind. All right? The reasoning mind wants to go off into fear. It wants to create resistance by thinking. You have to break that continuity. It's the continuity of evidence from the material five senses that brings the thinking mind into being. Okay? And so what we want to do is we want to laser focus our concentration down. And one of the best techniques I've learned how to do that we practice, and my kids are doing it now, is you can learn it free online, and then you can probably take the courses too. We're taking them. Mark Divine, SealFit, he teaches the box breath. Okay? You can learn that right on YouTube right now. So I don't feel bad about sharing it with you because it's out there and you can find it right now without having to pay for a subscription. But like I said, I'm not going to try to take anything from somebody else's material because we do have a subscription for that material. And it's all about the battle in the mind right now because that's where the real battle's played out. So what I do is I do about 10 minutes 2 or 3 times a day of getting into that box breathing rhythm cycle, okay, bringing my breath, okay, and I do 4-4-4s because that's what the kids and I are used to doing. We're 4 seconds in through the nose, hold at the top, 4 seconds out through the nose, hold at the bottom, and just rotating that cycle. Okay, so then we do other advanced things that we do to, you know, break the loops within all that. But the idea here is that you have to stay rooted in spirit all day, every day. That's your protection. You know, as a minister, I have to just give you that advice because that's the only thing, okay? The only person that's ever going to help you is someone who turns you into yourself. The only thing I could ever tell you to do that's going to work for you is to give you a technique, give you a scripture, give you something that turns you into yourself. It's the only thing that's going to work. You have to find that power within you, and you have to release it from within yourself. And so your blessing is your curse, and your curse is your blessing. So when we used to be blessed, when the world was so, you know, idle, okay, before all this began, that was also a curse, because most people never had the, you know, the penchant to want to get in there and spend that time in that still space, in the quietness, you know, the solitude of space between the thoughts, the nothingness, listening quietly to the I Am presence for guidance, receiving divine love from within thyself. It wasn't that easy before because there were so many things going on and so many distractions and so much busyness happening in the world. Everybody had a busyness about their behavior and their attitude. It was always go, 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 especially in the United States. The culture code in the United States is just do more. Make a list, do more, do. Okay? And then all that got disrupted. And so what you do, speaking of do, is you play on your, whatever you're given as a hand, you play it as a strength, all right? Perfect example, when I had Lyme disease and I was, put down in the bed for a long time and I couldn't physically do much, that's a detriment, right? I couldn't work my job, I couldn't bring in money. At first I played that for me card, and that didn't work for almost 2 years, and then I had to come to an end of that. And so I turned it into a strength. So what did I discover during that time? I discovered the non-physical. Okay? I discovered the wisdom of non-action. Okay, that's like the Tao. I discovered the wisdom of non-action, but I worked on my thought, and I corrected my thought, and that's when I came up with ABC break process. And I used primarily that technique over and over, and from that space I learned how to follow the fastest path to my joy in every moment, and then that was aligning with the fruit of the Spirit. Okay, alignment, correcting thought, alignment, correcting thought. And by the way, I talk about all this in my book, Trust, the Most Powerful Force in the Universe. You can get it still for $1 on Amazon. I think I'm just going to leave it there at $1 indefinitely. I didn't write the book to, make money selling the book, because it's not the way to make money these days. I wrote the book because it's a manifesto of the best that I've ever learned, that turned my life right side up using wisdom. And so I want people to have that, and it comes with a free training course, and that's a $777 value at least. It's got all kinds of techniques, trainings, everything. But anyway, what I've learned is that whatever your weakness is, okay, parlay it into a strength and watch what happens, okay? So for example, I discovered that non-physical when I was laid up all the time. And so what I did is I demonstrated the most prosperity up until that point that I'd ever had in my life. I went 6-figure and then 7-figure company out of nowhere. I didn't even know what I was doing, but I just was trusting the non-physical, and I was working with these techniques. And you see, it was that wisdom of non-action. See, the wisdom of non-action is really you getting you out of the way. You see, the blessing was the curse, because before I was so astute in my physical and I was always working out, I thought that was where my power was. And it was so limited because there is no power in flesh. So therefore, I was never able to really break through and make any kind of real money or do any kind of success that was meaningful. Other than, lift weights, which is fine, but it's still not physical when you're lifting weights. It's just repetition. That's why they call it reps, because you're doing repetition of conscious awareness and thought, and then over time you build belief. I can move 25 this week, maybe I can move 50, and then all of a sudden you're moving 50, and then you're moving 100, and etc. But you're still misidentifying with what you're doing, because it's not physical. You're using the non-physical. So again, that's to turn to spirit. Turn to spirit. Look to spirit for the answer. Okay? We don't try to solve things in the outer, we solve them in the inner, and we let the outer come into alignment. It's a big, big difference. The outer action that you do is only a validation, all right? It's a formality, okay? But it should never be a principle. The principle is not to move in the outer. The principle is to correct in the inner by aligning with what already is, and then demonstrating what already is in the midst of the confusion of your 5 senses. Okay, so the 5 senses, oh look, Matthew's broke, he's on the couch, he's got Lyme disease, right? All this stuff happening. Well, I started to do the ABC break process. I started to align with money flows freely and easily to me now, and that became my mantra. I started to use that mantra to break all the negative mind loops that were going on. And I was working with my breathing and all kinds of cool stuff. And then what started to happen is I started to demonstrate piercing through the veil, all right? I started to pierce through the confusion, and correctness started to present itself into my world and started to manifest as fact, okay? So the fiction ended and the fact remained. And the fact is that divine love is always ceaselessly pouring itself out because God's relationship to man are one. Okay, one and one. Okay, it's a direct continuity of divine love. There is no middleman. There's no obstruction. There's no delay. There's no resistance. The only resistance comes from you, inserting you into the equation with your thinking mind. And that's why you want to practice getting out of that thinking mind. The more you do, and the more you redirect that worrying, afraid, fearful thinking mind back into the prism, okay, the prism of God's collective totality, right? It's a totality. His works were already done before you even became aware, all right? Before you became aware of your own existence, self-aware, before you became self-aware, awareness already was complete within itself. And so you existing in the dream are the temporal thing. And so you want to identify not as the temporal thing, but as the permanent thing. And that permanent thing is source, being, deity, God the good, whatever you want to call it, okay? And so we start from that position. So the whole idea here is that how you go into anything is how you come out of it. So if you want to go into it from ignorance, you're going to come out of it in ignorance. You're going to come out of it with a clenched white knuckle flight the whole time and nothing but grit in your teeth and sand in your hands. You're going to have nothing because there's no power in material reality. It doesn't exist. So you can't play in a realm that doesn't exist. And you don't want to be drunk walking around in a realm that doesn't exist. In the Gospel of Truth, in the Nag Hammadi Library, it talks about how people were asleep in dreams and they were being chased, but nobody was there chasing. And they were trying to kill one another, but there's no one there to kill. That's the reality of the totality of the human collective consciousness, is that it is insane within its own myopic, dystopian, temporal, fictional time-space delusion. All right, it moves through time and space outside of the now, never occupies the now because it could never occupy a fact. And the now, which is the absoluteness of spirit that is forever intact, forever unchanging, is never obstructed by anything that it knows nothing about. And it only knows what it knows within its own mind, and you exist in that mind, and anything outside of that mind was never created. And so where are you in time and space, and where is the problem, and what is wrong? It's the correction of thought that has to take place, and it has to work through the emotions so that you see perfection, you be perfection, and you feel perfection, and that's when you are made in the image and likeness of God, okay? That's when you are given a name, right? Name is identification. It's identifying you as the reflection, right? Because if you're not the reflection, you don't exist. You're ignorant. You're not in fact. You're not in truth. You're in a temporal confusion, a fog, okay? That's what this all is. It's all a fog. You're seeing a big giant fog sweep the earth, and it has to find a place of rest because it has no rest. Remember, wickedness has no place of rest. So what happens is it scours looking for those who are beguiled in the middle place, the human mind. It has to take itself into the action and activity that you give it by absorbing it and identifying with it. The key is identifying with it. Now, this is easy in theory and a little bit more complex in application because it does require an ample degree of courage. And I'll give you an example of how I did it with money years ago When I started tithing, I realized that it was a principle idea that God created. Therefore, it was a fact in the mind of God and could never be obstructed by anything else because it was forever intact and remains true forever. And so I said, okay, this is a principle. I can lean on it. So I started working within that principle and tithing and honoring God. It really started to work for me. See, you have to burn away all the fear before the principle is the only thing left standing. Okay, that's retroductive logic. So we start with principle, all right? Principle is God is not a liar. God's not a man that he should lie. We know this, right? So what did God say about money? Okay, bring the tithes into the storehouse and prove me now. It's the only part in the Bible that says prove me now. That I shall not pour you out a blessing so much so that you don't have enough room to receive it, and I'll rebuke the devourer for your sake, okay? So get this. That's a principle. Now you may be walking around saying, well, that's great, but you don't realize it. I don't have a job. I don't have this. I've got this bill. I've got this problem and the code, the thing that's going around, and we got all these other things, right? And I say, okay, but that's fine. But you're talking about something that God never created. You're living inside of a confused state where there's nothing there other than something that is, it's like the darkness looking for your light. It needs your light. So what are you going to do with your light? Are you going to turn to the darkness and say, okay, I surrender, you win, I'm going to give in to you, and I'm going to, because I'm afraid, right? Because it's always fear. Fear is the first step to sin. Fear, confusion, lack of trust, double-mindedness, and division. That's how it works. Fear is the very first step. So fear is identification with material form and body. So if you don't identify with material form and body, then what do you got left? Well, it pretty much obliterates all thinking. So if you could obliterate all that thinking, which is actually fearing in disguise as thinking, it's actually fear. Because you're taking thought for your life, you're breaking a divine commandment that Jesus said, don't take thought for your life. Why? Because you don't have one. Take thought for God's life. Contemplate God's life. That's what you do. God's life is spirit. It's principle. So I said, you know what? God, if I go down, I'm going to go down believing in you. And I gave my whole life to that principle. See, what I did is I laid down my life to gain my life. That's what I'm talking about. That is the activity. See, that is the burning away, the chastening, the pruning, the destruction of error, consuming matter within oneself. See, all that's left is principle. You want to burn everything else away. And then when I did it with health, okay, we had to do this many times because it took a long duration for me to break through the fears regarding, my mortality that I believed I had in the physical flesh, right? I mean, let's be honest. If you were to find out today that you're not going to live in the flesh anymore, on a scale of 0 to 10, how much terror is going to come up? I know, I'll be honest, I had a 4 come up, all right? There's still 4 there, which means I'm still identifying as a body, which means I still need more work, all right? Now, that's pretty amazing. See, that shows you don't have to be perfect to get out of some serious jams. I was bedridden with Lyme disease, and I'm not even at a 0 yet, and I got out of Lyme disease with just 6 degrees of, down from 10, right? That's not bad. See, the only thing perfect is God, and we're going to that perfection. And so what happened was I was off, 10 degrees from the perfect still point, from the infinite one, the 1 and the 0. I was off 10 degrees of fear. And so I was living in that confusion through all of the material dream of the 5 senses, believing every lie that was coming through my mind and all of the opinions of the world out there that were all lying to me as well, because that's the father of lies. And so I was bringing all that in, and I was so confused and so lost. But it really was simple. See, once you no longer fear and once you no longer have the belief, then the foundation of that confusion no longer takes root within you. Therefore, it doesn't exist. It only exists in your thought. And your physical body only exists in your thought too. and you're identifying with it. And as long as you identify with it, it puts you under the curse of the law of sin and death. Now, under that law, all mortals are subject to persecution under that law, even unto death. Okay? That's what the Bible plainly and clearly says. Now, we know that against such, for the fruits of the Spirit, there is no law. So we want to get into a venue or an arena where no law can come against the highest law, divine law, right? We want to step into that venue and say, I'm under this jurisdiction now. I am set free by divine law. Wouldn't you like that? Well, that's what the Bible's all about too. And that's what it's there for, is it's to give you the instruction manual, and you actually have to work with it, okay? It's not enough to just know this. You have to actually work with it, and you have to contemplate it, okay? Meditate's too soft of a word, okay? Meditate can imply I just sit there and do nothing, but I'm saying if you're going to sit there, don't just do nothing. Contemplate what you are ascending towards, right? What does God's perfection mean to you? And the way to find that out is to look at the fruits of the Spirit. And you see, then it becomes more lifelike, because you're not quantifying it through intellectual capacity anymore, because out of the heart come the issues of life. What you're doing is you're moving from the intellectual capacity down to the heart, because the fruits of the Spirit occupy the heart. Okay, we have faith, hope, love, peace, kindness, goodness, long-suffering, meekness, humility, chastity. See, those things, against such there is no law. And so what I like to do is I like to say, what is this trouble that has come upon my dream of consciousness in a material body? What is this trouble other than a deficiency, right? It's a deficiency because all suffering is ignorance of the Father, because of identification with a deficiency. All right? So, what I need is an all-sufficiency to be whole again. I want to make my world, I want to make myself whole again. Well, in order to get whole again, I'm going to have to put in that which is, so that I can stand on that principle of that which is and hold steadfast to it and let it be the only thing standing. Because it is the principle itself that negates and destroys all of the lies and illusions of the false sense of self, the suffering self. So an example is with the money. That principle for me was faith. Faith, okay? That was a spiritual fruit, because I was living in a faithless world, believing in a false God. I believed that money and things were the God of this world, and that I had to go out and, under the sweat of the brow, go and get those things. Under my own guidance, my own intellect, my own resourcefulness, just like 95% of the population, and they all retire broke, dead, or disabled, so I already know their end. So I wasn't going to model failure, all right? I wanted to model success. Well, who was the best example of modeling that success? Christ Jesus, right? So what did Christ Jesus tell everyone? If you have faith of a mustard seed, you'll move this mountain. So the spiritual fruit is faith. So what did I do? I performed activities that invoked a spiritual quality from within myself, releasing it into my world. See, you have to be the source. You have to fill the deficiency from yourself, because that's what it means to be God or Christ-like, which means you are coming from the Father, the fullness of the Father. It's the fullness of the Father that fills the deficiency. So what I did with the dream that I had no money, see, it was a dream, it wasn't real, because it was a deficiency, and it was rooting me in a fear and telling me that I was going to run out, right? What I had to do was I had to pour forth from the completeness, from the fullness of the Father mind, that which is into the dream. See, once I brought principle into the now, then what it did is principle itself destroyed all of the erring human superstitious lies of the material 5 sense stream, and that consciousness popped the bubble. Okay? That's how it works. You bring that which is into the equation from within your heart. Do you get what I'm saying? If you didn't see, I feel bad for the people that don't listen this far. You know, it's astounding. I don't even make videos hardly ever anymore because it's like nobody wants to watch them, and I'm sitting over here like, well, that's too bad, because I guess they don't want to do anything that's going to change anything for the positive, because there's only one thing against such that has no law. That's the fruits of the Spirit. So if nobody's telling you to do that and to bring that into the correctness of the now, then you're not really going to do much of anything else that's going to work. It's only going to put you into another labyrinth of the same mental trap. And so what you'll do is you'll just move from this corridor over to that corridor, and you'll actually get nowhere. And most people love to go nowhere. All you have to do is track the results to figure that out. So, you are here. Thank you, God. Thank you. I love you, God. Thank you. Thank you for the very select that you have chosen wisdom to receive today, because Lord knows I do this for myself, because I need to remember this, but I also want to be able to share it, because, you know, nobody wants to be alone on an island, right? Okay. So what I'm telling you is, let's look at another example, okay? So we look at when I had the health issue, okay? What did I have to do with that health issue? Remember, fear and the belief are what held it in place. And by the way, be gentle with yourself, right? And there's the answer right there. There's the answer right there. Because that's what I wasn't. I wasn't gentle with myself. I would get so upset with myself, and I'd be so hard on myself that I would take myself to the gym over and over and over and end up right back in the ER again over 3 dozen times. And I pushed myself to near death so many times because I was hating myself, okay? See, I had a problem. I had a deficiency. I had 2 fruits going on. I had gentleness and love. They weren't there. They weren't there. And so what I was doing, everything else was all, you know, hey, you should take this vitamin, you should try this drug, you should, hey, these antibiotics are the best. Oh, try this ozone machine. Oh, better yet, okay, check this radionics machine out. That's incredible. Oh, wait, hold on. I know, we could do this spiritual healing technique. You know, that went on to the tune of maxing out every credit card and bankrupting. That went on for a long time. And so the first thing that got me out of the immediate jam was a mentor who came along and said, he just listened to me talk and he figured it out. He said, you got to stop taking it on the chin. He goes, and you're the one doing it. You're beating yourself up all day, every day. Now, how do you think you're going to ever get out of a jam when you're operating outside of divine law, and the only thing that's going to correct your deficiency, whatever it is divine law, because that's the only authority, it's the only authorizing power in the universe? How are you going to do it? Oh, you're going to take more material stuff, right? Good luck. Good luck with that. Because that solves one problem and brings up 10 more. That's how that stuff works. So, what did I have to do? My mentor said, hey, Matthew, why don't you try this? What is the fastest path to my joy in this moment? Ask and answer the question before taking any action, and just start there. And so, guess what I did? I did it to the T. I did it to the T. And things started rapidly changing. You see, it's kind of funny because when you take one fruit and you start to just dive into it, you see, they're all kind of a congregation, all right? The fruits of the Spirit are all kind of hovering around divine love itself. They're all sort of in that vibrational proximity. In fact, they're so much higher than the general consensus of fear, right? That even just taking any one of them, even if it's not the correct one yet, will bring you, boom, so much higher. So what I did is I first took joy and I started living from joy in every moment. See, regardless of the fallout means I didn't pay attention to the dream. I didn't say, well, the dream says I have to do this today and I have to do that, and then, I gotta worry about this and that. What I decided was that I was going to just forget about the dream altogether. Why? Because the dream is a dream, right? Do you sit and worry about a dream you had 3 weeks ago? No, because you're actually risen out of it, right? Well, here's the big news flash for you, is that, hey, the material dream of your five senses, you also have to rise out of that too. Okay, that's what's going on right now. You're in a material dream of the five senses. So the only way to rise out of that, because it is bound by law, you're bound by Satan under the law of sin. That's why you can't get out of it. Because you've turned away from the fruits of the Spirit, you've turned towards the things of this world, and they have captivated you through the middle place and beguiled you and locked you into your own state of suffering. And I'm here as your minister to tell you that against such there are no laws for the fruits of the Spirit. So what I did is I said, the material dream's got all these opinions, okay? People said, Matthew, you need to go to work. I said, oh, wow, okay, you don't know how much I'm suffering right now. I guess apparently you don't have any compassion. Matthew, you're such a loser. Matthew this, Matthew that, blah, 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 blah. Just a bunch of freaking adverb, verb, jargon, nonsense coming out of the babble speak of all the mortal tongues on the planet that are as ignorant as a $3 bill. They're just phony. Just a bunch of phoniness coming out everywhere. See, every man is a liar, but every word out of the mouth of God is true. See, that's principle. Okay, got it. So I'm not going to get anything from them because they're not teaching me about God. They're teaching me about some freaking belief they have in reasoning, because they're trying to identify if what they would do if they were me, right? Having no reference point, because they're not me. Okay, that won't work. So yeah, they said I should do this today. Here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to go play my guitar. So I did. Went and played my guitar. Played for 5 hours a day most days. People would be like, this guy, he's sitting here playing his guitar all day. He should be trying to do something with his life. I'll tell you what, that actually aligned my life and brought in all the opportunities. Okay, I tell the story over and over again, right? I tell the story about how I locked the front door in the store when I took it over, because everybody told me I should do this and that, and I ignored them all, followed the fastest path to my joy, ended up manifesting six-figure income right out of thin air. Because against such there is no law, and when you follow the fruit of the Spirit that you're lacking and deficient in out there, and you start to pour that forth into your world, then what you do is you cause yourself to ascend out of the dream of the deficiency within those five senses. You are the cause and you are the solution, and there is no one else that's going to be able to do anything for you other than instigate you to pour forth that which is correctness into your world, all right? And so once I started doing that, I started to get gentler with myself and to laugh more, and I was expressing more gentleness. And then I even went so far as to just start loving life again. Imagine that. I hated everything about life, and I started loving life again. And lo and behold, I started training like a pro athlete. What? I was bedridden, and all of a sudden, I'm training like a pro athlete at twice my age, and I'm in better condition now than I was then? Because I'm becoming more of the reflection of what is the eternal, unbreakable, unfailing power. There's only one power, one presence, one mind. So maybe I'll give you one more example before I let you go, okay? That's why you want to read my book, Trust, the Most Powerful Force in the Universe. Because I teach you how to do all these techniques, and I teach you the self-entrainment technique and how to scale the fruits and how to find the fruit, because this is everything. It is everything. In fact, a nice young man who's 24 years old in Italy wrote me. He's working to sell real estate. He said he did everything, knocked on doors, made all the calls, he did everything they told him to do, right? Then he followed my advice, followed the fastest path to his joy. So he went and he chilled with his girlfriend, hung out with his mom, started following his joy, and he said it wasn't but a couple hours later that I think a broker from China or somewhere else contacted him about a property, and he made a huge profit. Said he made over like $100,000 in a couple weeks or something like that, or whatever it was. And you know what? I think that was great if that wasn't the first time, if that was the first time it happened. But that's been happening over and over and over again, not just in my life, but it's been happening in people's lives that have learned this stuff. Because guess what? Against such there is no law. I'm not doing anything. I didn't teach him how to do anything that he didn't already know how to do. He just forgot because he fell asleep in a dream. And that dream told him through his drunk material five senses to follow reasoning of men, and men are fools. There's nothing but vanity in the minds of men. So what do? We get out of that vanity, we get into the fruits of the Spirit, and we pour it forth. You get this? And that's how the game is played. And that's what's going to change your life. And that's what they don't want you to know. And who are they? The rulers. And guess what? It doesn't matter what they think, because all power is within you. So you don't have to be a victim anymore. Take your power back.